Alright, hopefully people could fucking hear me now. So I just deleted the other stream because there was no sound for all of the fucking time and I didn't realize it until like 2 hours into it. So, real quick, because I really don't want to have to explain 2 hours worth of shit again. What I'm doing is, I live in Elizabeth, which has New Jersey, which has a rich history, but a lot of that history is sort of lost. And as a student of 20th century history, I want to try to make a more accessible list of old landmarks of where stores used to be, important parts of the city used to be. So I'm cross-referencing old newspapers to get those. And I'll explain as I go along how I'm doing that. So one thing that I did, I will explain again, now that I have sound, is that back then, one great thing about Elizabeth and having a bunch of old buildings, sometimes you'll see relics like this, which was an old Ivory soap advertisement. And I don't want to zoom in too far because then you really won't see it too much. But if I zoom in out here, you'll see it. And back in the day before they had billboards, they would paint advertisements on the side of buildings. And that's where this comes in. So even after over 100 years, it's still there. And another example is down here. Come on. Go further. Further. Too far. Back. No, I don't want that. I don't want to see that damn picture. Brother. I think this is as close as I'm going to be able to get. Unless, let's go here. There, I should be able to show you here. And they would also paint the sides of buildings instead of putting signs up. Especially if it's a landmark that was around for a long, long time. And by the way, this Hispanic building, I forget whether it's like Colombian or let's see what it is, Salvadorian. But either way, the restaurant is sort of blocking fucking Google Maps. I hate using it on the computer because using it on the computer sucks ass. So this part of the building is actually blocking this part, which is the Sheraton logo, because there's some mattresses here too. And you can see how a lot of buildings are in Elizabeth, how they would take the old structures and just fit new fronts on it, like almost like glue it on. That's how things are around here. They don't just use the existing structure. They don't just use the existing building. They just, basically just glue stuff over it. They just retrofit stuff. Like up here, how this used to be a big window, like the big glass window where it was like a pane. Now they just put modern windows in here and just concreted the rest of it off. And you can see it all the way over there. I think there's apartments up there now. I'm not sure. But this didn't always take up all that space, mind you. And you'll see a bunch of this stuff on like Elizabeth Avenue. So hopefully it's working now. Just want to make sure it is. So anyway, back to the newspaper. We have Vanity Vacuum, and Electrolux is a company, by the way, that's still around. They make Frigidaire stuff. And of course, my eyes are burning a little bit. So I've been on the computer a couple hours, and I really should have. I usually supposed to put the eye drops in every morning, but I forgot. 1205 East Grand. think I put it. Oh no, I didn't put it in. Oh, now I did. And that's the home of Vanity Vacuum. So I'm basically doing what the fucking library should be doing, but whatever. Because Elizabeth does have like this thing where as signs in certain places, and you just scan the QR code to get like a little narration about it. It's all like Revolutionary War and shit like that. Nothing from like more modern times, like the 21st century. Like 20th century. Excuse me. I'm not doing that because that's Newark. Although Bond was definitely a big star. I wonder. I should look see if they're still there. What the fuck was it? Market Street, 146 Market? Because even I've heard of them. Let's see if they're still there. Oh, no, it's a Foot Locker. But one thing that's great about Newark is that Newark has a lot of history too. It's just that I'm not so familiar with Newark too much. I'm more familiar with Elizabeth. So that's why I haven't. Like, see, at least Elizabeth, I know where certain places used to be and what they were. Newark, I really haven't been there too much, so I don't know where everything is. I don't know like the back of my hand like I do for Elizabeth. Let's just put it like that. Hanover, I think that's a store, or I know Dr. J's was around for a while. But yeah, this used to be Bond Clothes right here where the Foot Locker is now. Because you see, Newark, they still have a lot of their older buildings and to some extent their older signs. And it's weird because you can tell the architecture with Newark and Elizabeth are one and the same. Because, and they call it, this is Market Street, but there was also Broad Street in Newark. And if you look, like if you lived in Elizabeth and you didn't know any better, and I would show you a picture of this, you would swear it was Broad Street in Elizabeth, but it's not. It's Market Street in Newark. So, as you can see, one and the same. Apparently GameStop is still there in Newark. I'm stunned. Okay, so we're back on Broad Street right now. I don't know why it says Broad Street in here and it says Mayor Kenneth A. Gibson Boulevard. That makes no sense to me, but yeah, you can see it literally is the same architecture building-wise as Elizabeth, because they basically came up at the same time. It was just a different area. Obviously, Newark is the bigger town, but still. Like, you could definitely tell same architecture in the buildings. So, and you can see even in the Elizabeth newspaper that they advertised a lot of Newark stuff. And by the way, one major thing too back then in the 30s and 40s and 50s even was them public service advertising the benefits of electricity. And that's because for a lot of homes, they still weren't hooked up to electric. Or only certain things were hooked up. Or they were scared to use electrical appliances because back then it was still a new concept. And coke coppers, I believe I have that listed because that's coal. I see Copper's Coke, and that was, a different, because like I said earlier, coal coal was a primary source of heat back then. You know how, like, for example, here in Elizabeth, a lot of it is natural gas. Some people use even, I don't know if they use it too much anymore, but oil heat. Our house used to use oil heat. First, our house used coal. We used coal just like this. Then we went to oil heat because we had an oil tank in the back of the side yard there. Then we switched to natural gas when the whole town pretty much switched to natural gas. So, and I love how a lot of these people are bitching and complaining about natural gas and blah, blah, blah. Why we still use natural gas and blah, 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 blah. Why we make a big deal of it. Because in cities like ours, natural gas is all we have. Okay, we don't heat up our house electrically. You know, we don't use, electric stoves. We use natural gas. And it's not a Republican thing or a Democrat thing. It's just that's what the fuck we use. And to me personally, when you're saying you're trying, I get why in a way, especially some of these explosions and shit. But to me, when you say we're trying to get rid of natural gas, or we don't want to sell natural gas appliances, people like you are trying to cut people like us out. That's because we can't afford to change our house over. We can't afford new appliances. You just, barely. Can't afford to, to get a TV, a computer, even a PlayStation, it's a little much, but hey, we know at least we can pay it off. But when you're talking about appliances and things, you're talking thousands of dollars. And whenever I hear somebody talk about wanting to remove it, it's almost like they're saying, okay, fuck off, poors. Fuck off, you poor people. You can go to fucking hell. Nobody gives a shit about us poor fuck. And the whole debate about natural gas proves that. Because, like I said, Elizabeth, that's pretty much all we have. And Fishman's, I don't think I have listed. At 79 Broad. I don't think I have that list. Oh, yeah, I don't have that listed. And that would be Fishman's. Fishman's codes. And it's also weird, like, this paper's from 1939. This paper's from 1939, right? And sometimes, like, certain things seem, like, more modern than what, at the time of this, the advertisements, the style back then. Like, look at something like this. There's a certain font, like, the letters look painted on. Like, they're all animated, like, cartoonish. Right? And then you see something like this, which, especially the logo, which looks like something that you more see nowadays. Like, that's more of a visual style that you see more nowadays. So it throws you off sometimes when you look at a paper from 1939 and you see something so modern. Makes you stop and think, like, damn. And by the way, that's one really bad thing about microfilm, is because it's a negative. That's what microfilm is. Microfilm is a negative. So pictures that in the newspaper would be clear and concise, especially for black and white, you can't even make out any details in these pictures at all. So I'm sure for this one, I'm sure if you look at the original paper, you'd see people in here. You could barely make out faces, like right over here, like heads. but you can't really see shit. Like, you can't even see this woman's face, for example, or these two people. Here, this woman practically looks like a demon. You know, look at this shit. Like, she looks like a fucking demon. But I'm sure if you looked at the actual newspaper, she looks like a normal person. Like, for example, like there's supposed to be a team, like a football game here. You can't see shit. It's just a black blob, like a black square. Like there's supposed to be baseball. You can barely see what the fuck's going on here. You know, I think this is a boxing fight. You can't see shit. But that's how microfilm is. Because microfilm is more meant to be like a snapshot of words. It's not really meant to be used for pictures. And by the way, you see, guess they had comic strips back then too. And here's Buck Rogers, which a lot of people would know, especially if you're a retro gamer. You would know the name Buck Rogers. And that's where it came from, right here in this comic. And here's Popeye. Popeye was a comic. Gerke's was a big department store in Elizabeth. And you can see, it just says Broad and West Jersey Streets, which means it took up a corner, but there's no address. But Gerke's was a big department store, to the point even my aunt knew about it. And she's in her 70s. And by the way, I want to show as well, go all the way back to 1. So back in the day, newspapers often had 2 or 3 editions depending, because for a lot of people that was their only source of news. And of course, people got off of work at different times. So newspaper, when they call early edition, late edition, they're generally referring to newspapers, because back in the day, newspapers would have an early edition, which came out first thing in the morning. Then some papers this was only the bigger papers, like your Daily News, for example, would have a midday edition that came out around noon. And then papers would have what was called a late edition, which would come out at night. Like for example, this home edition, and you see how it says Wednesday evening, September 27th. So a lot of times this paper was published at night, because nighttime is when a lot of people were coming home from work. So whereas some people, the routine where they would go and get a cup of coffee, pick up a newspaper like my pops used to do, when God rest his soul. Back then, people would do that at night. Like, they would just get the paper on their way home. Like, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of the Saturday Evening Post. Things like that. They would get their paper on the night. And even my aunt would tell stories about how her and my grandmother would go at night to go get the new Daily Journal for the day and come home. Like, they would just go out, buy the Daily Journal and come back, because the journal was generally done at night. And of course, them just taking up a lot of, and they could make also what was called the last edition, which would be the final paper they made for the day. And the reason why they made like 3-4 different newspapers in a day is because more news would break, or more details would be coming out. Like, say if there was, this breaking news, right? If it broke in the first paper, there may have been more details that were added later on, or for the last edition, there may have been another headline story that didn't happen in the original paper. And I don't need to really go at these, because these are a lot of the same advertisements that you saw beforehand. So that's how that would be. So a lot of the paper would be unchanged. So let's take a look at the same year. Actually, wait, let's go to another year. Let me look at the paper from before the crash. And let's look at today's date about a decade earlier. See, oh damn. Okay, so the Daily Journal was older because it says established 1779 as the New Jersey Journal, which would make sense because Elizabeth was pretty much New Jersey at the time. Because, like I said, a lot of these places came from Elizabethtown, which was the original settlement here in New Jersey, which, we're in the center of. I want to see something. I want to see when microfilm was invented. Like when they started to be used. And by the way, for you kids that don't know what microfilm is, this is what it is. It's a bunch of pictures on a film reel. And what you do is usually there's this big machine with a monitor. And it's a projection monitor. And basically it makes a lot of noise because it's like, but let me see if I can pull up what a projector looks like. And you can see these at your local library. They're usually on the research floor, which in our library, and that, by the way, that's a small reader, but we have the bigger ones. This is what a microfilm reader generally looks like. So you would go to the research floor of your library, whichever floor that may be. Ours is the third floor. And you would go to one of the research librarians and say, I want to look at this paper from this date or this year. And they would be the ones to load up the machine. They have to do it, especially since some of these microphones are so old. They have to load it up for you. And then once they do, then you can navigate. They'll leave you alone. You can navigate whatever you want to see. And it's usually by a little clicker. Like it's a knob and you turn it. And that's how you control. I'm trying to find a large size picture so I can show you. So there's usually a knob in which you can turn, and depending on where you turn it, the microphone goes up or it goes down. And let me see if this is big enough. I know it's watermarked, but it should still be good enough to show you. So when the microfilm is loaded, there's your little lens. Here's the projector that's being projected onto. And as you can see, the knob says reverse or forward. Reverse puts because it goes down as you're reading it. So reverse brings it back down, has the film go down so it can go back to the top page. Forward has the pages go up so it can go down. And if there is a page that you want to save, it can make a copied image of that. That's where it's got all these dials, these buttons and shit, because you could choose to make a copy based on that page. It'll work like a copier, where you say, okay, I want to print out, say, this page. And what it does, and a lot of times for newspaper microfilm, they print it out on legal paper, on legal size paper, and it would print out that way, and it would look like you put it through the copier, and you'd pay the lady and be on your way. Because a lot of times back in the day when, again, by the way, these are so dark because these are the original microfilms. And I think they started doing that in the 50s or 60s. I want to say. Let me see here. Film 20s, so 19 between. So yeah, you figure around the 30, at least the 30s or 40s. So yeah, this film would be really old. Like at least from before my family moved here. So that's why a lot of this is so dark, because this is from the 20s. DC Dillinger, 1924 to 1935. And you can see Bamberger's, was in Newark. And here's Levy Brothers. 45 years. Okay, 45th anniversary. So that would be 1928 minus 45. So they started in 1883. Huh. And by the way, this is a shoe size you really don't see too much anymore, AAA. Because usually it's like, for women, it's usually like B, and sometimes C, and then your AAA, like wide. But you don't see AAA no more. Here's McManus Brothers. There's Hawk-and-Joss Paint. An 86 broad. I don't think I have that. Okay. And by the way, here's another. It's good. It's kind of good that I decided to pick 1928. Oh, damn! You saw that, right? I think you can actually copy this. Let me see. Copy. Yeah, because I think what they did was when they scanned it, the machine must have picked up the type and made it like where you can just copy and paste as well. That's cool. And it's important, by the way, that on the bottom it says a talking picture. And by the way, Fox Liberty, yes, that is the Liberty Theater. Those very same that I was talking about before was the Liberty Theater. So the Liberty was one of the major theaters in Elizabeth back in the 20s. And actually, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it was the first air-conditioned theater. They called it a refrigerated theater in Union County, which, now we take air conditioning for granted, but back in the 20s, there was no such thing, generally. But it's weird that it's funny that it says talking picture, because back in the day, especially if we're looking at a newspaper from 1928, talking pictures, films were usually silent. So in 27, 28, that's when films started to talk, where they had a especially Warner Brothers with their Vitaphone, they generally had a record shipped with the reel, with the reels that they were showing, and the record would be synced up to the movie that's showing on the screen. Later on, that was replaced by what we use now, like the magnetic film, where it's, they put the soundtrack on the film. There's a video, by the way, about that. And let me see if I can go on regular YouTube. And it's a nice little cartoon, but it's also entertaining as well. Oh, that's cute. The dude made a Game Boy Advance looking like a Playdate. It's called Finding His Voice, and it's it's great that they actually preserve the film because it's important. What this small film is about, it's a little cartoon of Max Fleischer did it. We also did Popeye and Superman and a lot of the 40s cartoons, like, I know he did others, but it's right up there with like Looney Tunes and Disney and stuff like that. But anyway, he made this film for Western Electric, who at the time was making a sound system for theaters. And it was literally about putting a voice to film. So it's done in a cartoonish way. I should put that on so this way we can watch it. Man, this is a hangout after all. And I know it's, rough by today's standards, like the sound and everything, but back in the day, this is what it was all about. And it's nice and cutesy as well, so. And we practically sort of use the same type of film these days. Because this was such a new thing back then. It was such a novelty. Some people were even, sorry, the mouse moved. Some people were even scared. Like, they didn't want to go see a movie where people talked. It scared people that much, some people. And believe it or not, there were some people that actually preferred black and white films because the colors, it looked too realistic. Facts, true facts. So if you're familiar with like the old Popeye cartoon, and it's I forget the fuck is his name. And this is the General Silent film.
Why, you guys are new man. Haven't you heard about what thing Dr. Webster did for me? He kept up my throat, gave me a bit of vocal cord. You ought to see him. Take it from me, you'll never land a job the way you are.
And it's basically telling people that, hey, silent films they're on their way out the door. If you want to make a film, I don't know why the fuck mouse moves every time I select this thing. Every time I move the cloth. Where basically, if you want to keep up, you have to learn to adapt to talking film. So anyway, if you're familiar with like Popeye and the old Superman cartoons from the 40s, this is the kind of style you're seeing here now. Basically, it was a humorous and fun way to explain to people how the new sound system worked.
You have to set you up to the 90s. Open your mouth. No wonder you can't talk. You have no soundtrack. Come right along with me.
So we would raise the volume a little bit so you can just see how it worked.
Knock let's put on an act for Mindy and let him follow us through.
And by the way, that's where the bell, like if you watch like movies where they talk about old Hollywood or show movie sets from back in the day, that's why if you hear the bell in the back, I think they still have them on movie sets, like a set, like closed set. Because when the bell goes off, that means shut the fuck up because we're about to film. And by the way, apologies to people who are epileptic, because there is going to be some blinking.
Inside this booth is a motion picture camera which is taking pictures through this window. You use the soundproof booth. When it's closed, it keeps the camera noise away from the microphone. The camera is operated by a motor which runs at exactly the same speed as the motor in the sound speed. Woo, it's hot in this booth. Let's get out on the set again.
It does. It gets really hot.
The sound is picked up by the microphones on the stage. The sound waves are picked up by this wonderful mechanical ear, the microphone, which is really a glorified telephone transmitter. This microphone changes the sound waves into electrical vibrations, which are amplified here and sent along these wires to the mixer room. The sounds from the stage microphones are mixed here so that they sound natural for the action in the production. Mr. Mixer sees the actors through this window and hears them only through this horn.
Obviously, nowadays mixers are digital.
Now that we've got the sound right, I'll show you how it's amplified.
Where it's got like a, I'm sure some of you have seen a soundboard.
The power from the microphone is amplified about 10 million times by these vacuum tubes, making the voice current strong enough to operate the machines that photograph the sound. Do you follow me? This is the machine that is used to record the sound on film. This sound film is traveling at the same rate of speed as the picture film in the camera booth. The light valve has two thin metal strings stretched across this tiny slit. On one side of the slit is a strong light, while on the other is a film, moving at exactly the same speed as the picture camera in the studio. The greatly amplified voice current passing through these tiny light valve strings move them closer together or further apart, thus changing the size of the slit. Therefore, the light varies as it passes through this rapidly changing opening, leaving a true photographic record of the voice current on the film.
Which is why the voice track on a film looks like that. It looks like a barcode.
Well, here we are. Here are our two negatives developed. The next step is to print these two negatives onto a third piece of film. We'll print the sound record first, and then the picture record.
If you ever seen a piece of film,
A completed sound.
that's why if you notice when something's in widescreen, there's bars on the top and bottom because it needs to fit the film reel.
Picture and sound projector. One motor drives both picture and sound equipment. See? Let me illustrate this with a simple diagram. This lamp.
One thing I want to go back real quick because I need to point something out.
This is the picture and sound projector.
And by the way, one of the reason why how to explain it, why there is this big round thing.
One motor drives.
That's because of this. So because Warner Brothers was still using Vitaphone, which was a separate sound record. Like, you seen how they explained how sound is on the film strip itself? Warner Brothers didn't adapt to that right away because they had their own system. And their own system was to ship a separate record with the movie, with the reels. So most projectors around this time, because it was expensive to change over equipment in a movie theater, right? So they made a solution for theater owners to have sound no matter what movie. Basically, it was they didn't want to get just a disc related projector because then they would only be able to show Vitaphone films. As a theater exhibitor, your job is to show as many movies as possible. Like, you want to be able to show whatever movie that you want to your audience, and you want a piece of equipment that's going to allow you to do that. So what happened was a lot of these projectors back then, around 1929, had a setting. Like, they were able to do both. So, and technically, if he's going to run the film, he really should have pressed this. So, otherwise, he would have no sound. So, if you were going to show a silent film, you turn this off because there would be no sound coming from it because it's a silent film. Because silent films, a lot of times, when you watch a silent film, you hear music. That was added post production, like modern days. Back in the day when they showed silent films in the movie theaters, they had a live piano player or a live orchestra playing that music. There was no silent films being shown with music. That would happen a lot later. So anyway, say if a movie used a Vitaphone disc, you'd flick the switch to disc. But if the sound is on film, like you watch them do in this cartoon, you'd flick the switch to film. So this way, theater owners had one single projector that could play everything they threw at it. Of course, they didn't want to talk about disc because disc was Vitaphone, which was Warner Brothers.
This lamp illuminates the soundtrack on the film.
And one final thing to note is Warner Brothers, the Vitaphone system, and the Western Electric sound system were technically competitors.
Let me illustrate this with a simple diagram. This lamp illuminates the soundtrack on the film. The light from the lamp passes through the slit, throwing a very narrow line of brilliant light on the soundtrack. As the film runs past this light, the marks on the soundtrack cause the light to increase and decrease. This light in turn causes the current through the photoelectric cell to increase and decrease, thus producing the electric vibratory sound wave. The current from the photoelectric cell is kept up by the amplifier, and then this amplified is carried by wires through the theater and down to the screen on the stage.
Yeah, because back in the day, the sound system was behind the screen. Which sometimes it is nowadays, but because it's generally 5.1, 7.1, there's two major speakers in the front with subwoofer, and then there's speakers from the theater nowadays.
The picture is being shown. The sound which was recorded is reproduced in set with the picture. The screen is full of small holes so that the horns may be placed behind the screen to let the sound through.
And that's the same way they make the screen
The
now.
sound is coming from the image of the speaker. Talkie, there goes your cue. You're next on screen.
So next time you go to a movie theater and you have this movie screen right in front of you, take a closer look at it. You'll see the holes.
Now, something's doing this stuff. Professor, you can watch me. Look here, Marty. If you want to stay on the screen with me, suppose we get together for a little slow time. What do you think?
And of course, as you can tell by this, one of the major things that they would do in talking film to basically like promote and push this system with the idea of a talking picture was musicals. And I hate how they do this stupid shit like that. So yeah, so back in the day, big thing that they used to do to pretty much sell the concept of talking pictures was musicals. Was either mute, which is why if you ask your grandparents or even your great grandparents, they'll say how popular musicals were back in the 30s and 40s because that's what pretty much sold the concept of a talking picture. I mean, and even if it wasn't a musical, they had some musical number or songs. That's why a lot of these Broadway plays and stuff got put on the screen because of that. So, by the way, I'm probably going to be getting off of here in a little bit because my leg is starting to kill me in this chair. Because I've been sitting in this chair for like all morning. Oh, here we go. 76 to 84 Broad. Let's look at that. 76. I think I have that listed. Yep. 76 to 84 Broad. So we see easy pickings here. And let's check 84. Oh, okay. So that's 80. 74. By the way, remember, well, then again, I don't think you heard me when I said earlier, you go by lots. So this would be a lot, this would be a lot, this would be a lot. So 74, 76, here's 80, 84. So here's 76, 76, 78, 80, 81, 80 to 82, 84. And that's what I'm also talking about, looking at the structures, because Levy Brothers was a major department store with multiple floors. And multiple floors would have multiple windows. And since Elizabeth kept a lot of its structure for its really big landmarks, like the old Levy Brothers building, you could look at it and go, yeah, that was a department store. Like, you could just tell. So it's also using context clues to help you. Like, if you know the type of building you're looking for, like, for example, this is where Gerke's used to be. And now it's a Shopper's World. It's been that way even from when I was a kid. This is a Shopper's World, actually, funnily enough, is one of the only places I was able to find some of the harder to find Hasbro, the WWF Hasbros as a kid. Because since Shopper's World is more of a discount store, like a, I forget, there's a word for stores like this. It is a department store, like an outlet. So there a lot of times this is clearance or factory second stuff here. And you could tell, and by the way, they do still have multiple floors at Shopper's World. But you could tell, right, just by this alone, you could tell that this was a major, major department store. You can see some of the window trim on that floor. I don't know if the upper floors are still being used, but I know at least the second and third floor, the second floor, first floor, third floor, and a basement is still used in there, because I haven't been in there since way before the pandemic. And then you have your insurance. And by the way, one of the things I want to point out again, because the fucking sound was off as I was doing it, which says I'm getting tired too. Shit. Anyway, sorry for all the yawning and shit. Anyway, there was no TV back then, only radio, right? And one of the interesting things about it is, if you know anything about TV really, is that the major networks like CBS, NBC, ABC started out in radio because there was no TV back then. The most interesting thing about it is that two things. Firstly, NBC was sort of a monopoly because they practically invented radio. NBC was an offshoot of RCA, who basically brought the first radio over, the Radio Corporation of America. And they needed a station to go along with it, so they created the National Broadcasting Company. And by the way, NBC now is owned by Comcast, a large cable company who also owns Universal. So now it's NBC Universal. So anyway, when the government came at NBC, they forced NBC to split into two networks. You had the regular NBC network, which was considered NBC Red, and then you had the other network they split off, which was NBC Blue, or what they titled the Blue Network. So what had happened was, later on down the line, the Blue Network became ABC, the American Broadcasting Company. That would happen, I think, in 45, I'm going to say. 43, close enough. So you're looking at this, and especially when I showed the 1939 paper, going, well, if ABC wasn't around then, why is their call letters ABC listed? And that confused the shit out of me too. So it's not just you. And you can see WFAN is still around as a sports network. WMAF was NBC. So that was the main NBC. And then, where the hell is it? WJZ was NBC Blue, which later became ABC. Now, the reason why ABC is listed is because, actually, and fun fact, ABC, WABC around this time was CBS. Yeah. So CBS literally had, and it's New York City, because New York was the major market for radio back then, much like it's the flagship of TV even now. So WABC was the flagship station for CBS, of all things. And when ABC came around, rightfully so, all of a sudden CBS wasn't comfortable having its rivals' call letters as their station, as their flagship station. So they made a deal with another radio station to take the call letters of WCBS, and WABC became WCBS. And then obviously WABC was given to ABC to use as their call letters. So when you read a paper from before 1943, WABC was CBS. The only call letters that never really changed through all of these years was, and either the band was WOR, which is still found on 710 on your AM dial here in New York. It's been that way since the late 20s. So imagine that, all these stations changing, passing, all these stations changing, passing owners, being different frequencies, different call letters, different names. WOR still remains. Now I got the windows open, I'm smelling a little bit smoke, so I'm guessing that's coming from outside, because we have Valenka outside. So, right over there. So that's why they always burn wood over there. Oh, look at that. No, general election in November to 1928. And by the way, Union County Board of Elections is still there. Let me just and there's a 211 Broad. I think I saved that already. Yeah. So I gotta edit that. Let me see if I can take advantage and copy this. Yes, I can, which is great because I could just paste. There we go. So that's the first time that I've gone through these newspapers and seen one address for two different things. I'm sure that place closed during the Great Depression. Because remember, the last paper I looked at was 1939. When I started doing the list, I started looking at 1942. Now we're in 1928. I want to make sure I'm still in the air. That's before the Great. This is before the Great Depression. Okay, so the smoke smell sort of disappeared. So I'm sure that came in from the fucking restaurant. Shoals Motor 333 North Broad. And right around here again. So let's do this. Pumps. Pronouncing SHOL. And I was, and by the way, like I said earlier, but the webcam audio wasn't on. People have to also understand that back in the day, there wasn't just Ford and Chevrolet and Buick and all that stuff. There were smaller companies like American Motor and Studebaker, Durant Motors, which later became, when they closed the plant, it became a Big Bear supermarket, which was pretty much the original major supermarket. King Cullen may have did the concept first in 1930, but Big Bear set the standard for the modern supermarket. The basically compare, King Cullen was basically a corner store, and like your normal bodega or smaller local supermarket, whereas Big Bear was pretty much Walmart. Like Big Bear pretty much, it was Walmart in comparison. And here's a Michelin ad from 1928. And of course, Standard Oil, which later became Amoco, now BP. Fun fact, my grandfather worked for Amoco for many years. My grandfather was a mechanic. So he made a hell of a good living. He was a mechanic even during World War II, which is where he sort of picked it up. And he even managed a few of the stations around here before he retired in the late 80s. And of course, genuine, even now, like talk of genuine meds. Here's an advertisement for Lipton tea. And of course, you had the snake oil shit still around back then. And Buick, one thing I want to show about that, and I'm near there, so I can literally just go up the street, because Buick, and it's really weird how like sometimes that you go to Google Photos and you'll see like really old pictures that were taken. So anyway, Union County Buick used to be this whole building over here. And that's why you see, like, even though it's a bank, why there's garages here. Because not only did they sell cars, you could drive them off the lot, but they also, the showrooms and everything, but you could also bring your car here to get fixed. So that's why. But anyway, this is the big thing I want to show. And Union County Buick was around until at least the early 90s, because I remember that place being around. My grandfather bought one of his used cars there, one that he had for many years, as a matter of fact. And he used to go there get parts and fix it himself since he was a mechanic. So AAA Auto Body obviously hasn't been around since 1915. The sign actually came from Union County Buick. And where this says, like, the shadow part here, that used to be colored in white. So you have white here and then the blue and red background. This actually, because this sign originally was Union County Buick. And they were around since 1915. They were around from 1915 until, like I said, the early 90s. I want to see, like, if somebody knows when they closed. Because it's so recent, people probably know. And by the way, right now on eBay, someone is actually selling a matchbook from that location. And yes, this is another smaller brand, Opel. Now, sometimes major manufacturers like Buick, like General Motors, would either buy, smaller, like they buy the rights to bring certain European cars over here. But I think Opel was like a Buick car that was, if I'm not mistaken, I think Opel was part of Buick, but they were more budget centric. Oh, it's German. Okay, so it was one of those things where, okay, so it's owned by General Motors from 1929 until 2017. So damn, they still made Opel? Even now? God damn. I remember more Opels from like the 50s to the 70s. Okay, so they sold them across. They sold these again over in Europe. So they didn't really sell Opels past the 70s. All right, in America. All right. It's funny. See, this is what I'm talking about. Like, that company was around for almost 100 years. And, like, about, like, good, like, excuse me, like, it's around 70, 80 years. And not one mention on the internet about them. So this is why it's important to have a local history of what used to be around, because unless they were, like, well known, like, unless, especially the people that would remember them have long since died. Oh, shit. Holy hell. I didn't expect to see this. I mean, granted, these are a lot bigger, but I know there was a Regent Theater on Broad, but I didn't think that I would run into an advertisement for the theater reopening. That's cool. Let me try to save that because I can't. Of course, it's preparing for printing, even though I only want one page. I'm probably just going to save that page. And by the way, this is what I was talking about when I showed that film about finding his voice. where see it says new improved Vitaphone and Movietone. Movietone is what they generally called the Western Electric system. So theaters would get those cameras that could do both. So this way they didn't have to choose. What page am I at right now? Oh, I want to say, let's go down further. 12, maybe? Yeah. So I'm going to save that as a PDF. There we go. And you can see that there was some text behind that. And by the way, yes, there used to be a big thing, like theaters opening and stuff like that. So this is right around when like the talkies took over. And you can see that instead of having a smaller little, just a window like this, back in the day, like in the 30s, now all of a sudden we had these big, gigantic advertisements. And you see that they had movie stars coming to Elizabeth to promote their movies, much like you would in New York or Los Angeles. We have them coming to Elizabeth. So you can see right here, a celebrated movie star in person. And you see the Fox Liberty, that was the Liberty Theater. Fox Movietone, Vitaphone, and Vaudeville. So they would have vaudeville acts at the theaters too. So it wasn't just movies back then, they would also have stage plays. And by the way, another thing that I was explaining before that the camera cut off, because I had no webcam audio. So back in the day, one thing you'll notice on all these movies, no show times. And that's because back in the day, a lot of movie theaters would just run one movie, or if they ran a second one as a double feature. So it's not like now where you pay your money to get in, you would see a specific showtime and that's it. You would just pay your money to get in. And you could literally stop in any time you wanted, as long as they were open, and they would run the movies continuously all day long. So if you just happened to get in the middle of the movie, you could stay and just watch what you missed when it looped back around. Or say if you really liked the movie, you could just watch it again and again and again and again and again until closing. So your money was only an admission into the theater. The concept of showtimes really didn't start until Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, because Alfred Hitchcock didn't want the plot twists and turns to be spoiled. He wanted you in for the whole story. So he came up with the concept of a showtime and saying, okay, well, if you don't show up on time, you're not getting in. So it's not like, okay, I could just show up whenever I want, pay my money and get in and then see it as much as I want. You had to get in and out at the end. And that was Hitchcock's doing. So you couldn't just show up and say, hey, I'm going to go see Psycho. And because not only would they not let you in, but a lot of times for that movie, there was a line around the block because people weren't used to that concept. They just thought, hey, I could just show up to the movie theater, pay my money, and walk in. When no, you couldn't do that with this movie. You had to wait. And since a lot of people heard good things about this movie, they waited. So when you look back at these old newspapers, you're not going to see showtimes because there was none. That's not how it worked back then. And showtimes really didn't take off until the theaters started showing multiple movies. So now all of a sudden, instead of you paying your money and getting to stay as long as you wanted, you only got to see that particular movie in which you paid to see. And another reason they did that is because they wanted to make sure that the money you paid was going to the movie you actually saw. Where it wouldn't be a problem if there was only one movie playing there, but when they started playing 2 movies and 3 movies, that's what, and more, like the Jersey Gardens with their 20 movies and New York with 25, now it's a problem. You can't do that. And the best, and even when you do A-list, you have to literally tell them, okay, I'm seeing this movie and that movie and this movie. All right, so we're going to look at 871 Elizabeth Ave right now. Probably going to do a couple more, then piss off for the day because my legs are killing me on here. And former home of Beatty's Market, so we're going to... So I'm trying to figure out what the hell is there now. We're going to put our little man, little person over here. Oh yeah, you can tell if they tell this is a supermarket. Look at how the building looks. Let me see. I know this is the building that burnt recently, but it had that major fire. Holy shit! All right, and you got margarine here. I think they still make HO oatmeal. There's A&P, and A&P was a big thing back then. Like it was a major chain. Obviously, that's one of the ones people would know because A&P was around for so long. I used to joke to my friends. We used to call it ass and piss instead of A&P. And lye obviously was a poison. Most people know it as a poison, but lye was more used to unclog drains. Anchor's Eagle Grocery. And there still is an Eagle supermarket in Elizabeth. I don't know if it's related to this, but I know they exist. All right. And of course, these are movies as well, but that's Cranford. Of course, a cigarette ad, you can't not have that. 700 Franklin. All right. Let me see if there's anything else more. 258 Morris. Okay. And that would be Jacoby Pet Shop. Yeah, Camry. Let's see what it looks like now. 286. 284. So this was the pet shop over here. Right there. That would be the pet shop. And of course, they just said markets located in, obviously, Elizabeth, but they didn't say where. Of course, you have a political cartoon or whatever that was. Cream of farina, which I think is I think it's the same thing as cream of wheat. And of course, you have your comics. Well, Felix the cat. There's Gurky. And you can tell the building, the cartoon here is the same building as the Shoppers World. And they still have the bargain basement there, by the way. All right, so now we're just repeating here at the last edition. So I'm gonna get off for right now. I gotta try to lay down for a little bit. I got other stuff I need to do. So hopefully I can do this again next week. And until then, I will see you. But also one thing I want to also point out, a couple things, is that tomorrow is the last videos for the EverDrive N8, in which we'll be showing, Big John's class, Big John's favorites, which is my stepdad, the games he owned, because what I played was basically his games, and a couple other things. The week after that, we start the Claire project, in which we're making a Resident Evil Code Veronica Dreamcast. And not only is it the Dreamcast 25th anniversary that just passed September 9th, but it's also Halloween. And what better way to celebrate both than to make the Dreamcast of my personal dreams, the Claire, which that's what we're calling it. That's the Dreamcast name, Claire. And it's a build that almost anybody can do. So until next time we meet, Rachel Schaefer signing off.